As some of you may know, alongside the podcast, I also run the How Does She Do It online membership community. And I have to say, it's become one of the things that I am most proud of in my career. It's a small, intimate, subscription-based community for women in business. And at its heart, it's about one thing: making sure that you never have to feel alone in running your business. Because if there's one thing I hear more than anything else, it's that running your own business can be incredibly isolating. The self-doubt, uncertainty, the days when you're not sure if you're doing the right thing, I've been there, and I know that so many of you have too. This membership offers a genuine support network, real women, real conversations, and real help when you need it. There's online networking, monthly guest expert masterclasses, business tools, accountability, support including online co-working, a brilliant WhatsApp community, and an incredible directory too. All in one place, all designed to help you not just survive in business, but truly thrive. This community is growing all of the time, and the energy within it honestly blows my mind on a regular basis. I'm watching women grow in confidence, push through their comfort zones, and build connections that genuinely change the way they feel about their businesses and themselves. If any of this resonates with you, and if you've been listening to this podcast thinking I could really do with a community like that, then I would absolutely love for you to come and find out more. You can find all the details in the show notes, and if you'd like to have a chat with me before you take the plunge, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Warmly welcoming you to How Does She Do It, the podcast, with me, your host, Jo Ferroni. Join me on my journey as I explore finding a gentle balance in both business and life, because being kind to ourselves is our superpower. What if rejection wasn't something to dread, but something to actively collect? That's just one of the ideas that makes today's guest, Liz Mosley, graphic designer, brand specialist, and host of the Building Your Brand podcast, such a refreshing voice for small business owners. In today's episode, Liz walks us through a journey that began with a firm "I will never work for myself," that eventually flipped into a thriving design business she's been running full-time for the past 6 years. Her story is one of gradual, intuitive steps rather than grand plans, and there's a lot of comfort in that for anyone who feels like they should have it all mapped out by now. I love what Liz is all about, and some of her philosophies really resonated with me, not least the idea that your branding is the business equivalent of putting on an outfit that genuinely feels like you, and how the confidence that follows can transform how you show up, sell, and grow. But you particularly won't want to miss out on Liz's rejection challenge, and how flipping the script on rejection from something shameful into something to pursue actually flooded her with yeses. 3 years on, and it has opened up so many doors for her that likely would otherwise have remained unopened. This has been properly transformational for Liz, and it could be for you too. But that's enough from me. Enjoy the show. This week's episode is sponsored by Jo Allen, a nervous system and mindset coach. If any part of you has been feeling flat, exhausted, or quietly disconnected from yourself lately, then this will really resonate. Jo specialises in supporting women who've spent years putting everyone else first. Perhaps your children are a little older, life is slightly less intense, and yet, instead of feeling excited about what's next, your inner spark just seems to have gone out. Jo understands this deeply because she's lived it herself, and she knows that the nervous system can't simply switch back into feeling calm, energised and inspired on its own, which is why her work goes far beyond mindset alone. Her signature one-to-one programme, Back to Bright, is a 3-month journey designed to help you move out of survival mode and back into feeling calm, clear, confident and truly alive again. You can work with Jo through online sessions or walk and talk sessions if you're local to Fleet in Hampshire. As a listener of my podcast, you can get 20% off the Back to Bright programme. Simply mention How Does She Do It when you book. And Jo is also offering a complimentary Back to Bright breakthrough session so you can get a real feel for her approach before committing to anything. Find out more and book your free session using the link in the show notes. Liz, welcome to the podcast. This is quite a treat for me because we have never met before. And so I especially love it when I get to interview someone that I've never had a conversation with, because I get to learn along with my listeners as well. And I just find it fascinating. And I'm really, really looking forward to finding out more from you today. How are you doing?
Good. I'm having a good day. It's nice and sunny. It's massively impacted my mood. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we've both got sun, which is really lovely, even though we are miles apart from one another. So let's get stuck in. I've got to ask you, as a business owner, have you always worked for yourself, or perhaps something else came before Liz Mosley Design? Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I know. So I haven't always worked for myself. In fact, hilariously to me, when I was at university, a lot of other people on my course, so I studied graphic design, a lot of other people on my course, had goals of working for themselves, setting up their own agency. And I was always adamant that that was not like a plan for me. Like that was not what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to go and work for other people. And I did probably for about I think it was about 8 or 9 years. So I started off in a small agency and then I worked in house as part of a design team in a university for like 7 years. And then while I was there, started dabbling in working for myself. So, like, I think this is quite a sort of typical story. A friend of a friend asks you to design something, and I was like, oh, I'll give it a go. And I guess got a taste for it. And then started to sort of slowly reduce my hours in my full-time job. So I went down to 4 days a week, started doing a bit more client work. And then I had kids. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to go back to working for someone else. I'm going to go all in on my own thing. And it felt like I guess like a frustrating start in the sense that it was very stop-starty because I had 2 kids. I would sort of like scale back the work and then increase the work as I had capacity. And it's only really been in the last sort of 6 years that I've gone sort of like all in. This is my, like full-time thing. I'm earning a decent amount of money to support my family. So yeah, I think in its purest form, it's been 6 years working for myself. In reality, I've been sort of playing around with it for the last sort of 10 years.
How wonderful. And yeah, you're right. So many people do kind of dabble, as you put it, before they perhaps make that jump away from employment, whatever employment looks like to them. I take my hat off to you that you then decided to go all in when you did have the kids. And I completely understand why. But I also think that is a really major step, actually, a bold and brave and beautiful step as well, because of course you didn't want to go back to work and leave the kids. And so it makes so much sense. But at the same time, when we are doing our own thing, everything does fall on us, doesn't it? So how wonderful that you'd built your way up to it as well. I love that it started with that seed of someone asking you to do something for them.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need that, don't you? You need an opportunity to try something out and just be like, "Oh, actually," because it makes me laugh now because I genuinely think I would struggle to go back to working for someone else. So it makes me laugh thinking back that I was like really like anti working for myself at the start, and now I can't really imagine anything else. But I think sometimes, yeah, you need that little nudge just to like give it a go and see. And then you're like, oh, hang on, I can totally see how this could work. And I think, I was very fortunate. A lot of things kind of fell into place in a way that I hadn't really planned, but just worked really well. Even just like the career that I chose, like I didn't choose it because I thought it would be the sort of career that would work well when or if I had children, but it has. Like it's a career that typically you can go freelance and you can run your own business. And I'd never really like thought that far ahead. And so I feel very lucky that kind of things fell into place to make it possible.
What a wonderful falling into place of things. That's
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And that's something that I was going to ask you, whether the growth has been organic or whether it was, strategy from the start. And to me it sounds like it has been an organic growth. Would that be correct?
Very organic. I have come to realize Well, and people often tell me that I'm not giving myself enough credit, but most things in my business, I do. I guess it comes from a bit of intuition, but most of it is just like, oh, do you know what? I'm going to try this and see what happens. And there usually isn't much strategy behind it at the start, or not very conscious strategy. And then I think what happens is I try the thing, it works, I can see how it's benefiting my business, and then I almost like go back and put the strategy in at a later date. So yeah, I would say absolutely organic. Like I definitely didn't come to it with this big plan. It was more like, okay, I can see how this is working. I'm going to experiment, try a few different things, see where it goes. Probably like the longer I've been doing it, it's easier to be a bit more strategic now, and I can see what's working, what isn't. I think I know myself better. Like one of the things that really struck me is working for yourself is such a sort of revealing process about yourself, and like you have to learn so much about like what your strengths are, what what you're not good at. And I feel like as I've got more, I guess, aware of what I'm like, how I like to run my business, what things I enjoy, what things I don't enjoy, I can now come to things with a bit more strategy earlier on. But yeah, I mean, mostly it's like, oh, this sounds fun. I'm going to try it and see what happens. And then I'm like, oh, okay, this is working. Let's see how I can make this a strategic element of my business.
Oh my gosh, I just love everything that you've just shared. And I know that my listeners will have their ears pricked back as you've spoken that there. Spoken like a true creative, I believe. And I really admire that in creative people, how, and maybe it's not everyone, but creatives that I've come across, they feel, and with what you said, you feel to me like someone who isn't going to sit around worrying, procrastinating, should I, shouldn't I? It's almost like, I'm going to do it and then we'll see what happens. And then we can sort of work out whether we're going to ditch it because it hasn't worked, or whether we're going to then spend some time crafting and shaping it, adding a bit of strategy to prolong it and to make it part of the game plan. I really think that is a massive, massive plus in the pros column. It's something I really, really admire.
I think that is one of the biggest lessons that I learned sort of early on in running my business, was like having that experimental mindset. I think when I first started, I mean, I think this is common for everybody, like there's this fear of like, well, I don't want to try it in case it goes wrong. And then with that mindset, you kind of never do the thing because there's always a possibility that it's going to go wrong and it's not going to work. And then I think I heard a coach sort of talk about this experimental mindset. And I was like, you know what? If I think of everything, like take the emotion out of it a bit, which is hard for me because I am very emotional, but like take the emotion out of it, think about it more from like a bit of a data perspective, like a bit of a sort of scientific lens. And I'm like, okay, this is an experiment I'm doing. Like there's almost then no failure because it's like I'm just learning some more information. The information might be that I hate this thing and I don't want to do it anymore, and that's fine. Or the information might be, okay, I've found this incredible thing that I love and I can like push forward and like pursue that. So I think the experimental mindset has been huge for me. And I think the other thing in more recent years that I've realized is that my business flourishes and does so much better when I pursue the joy. So like when I find the thing that I love and I push forward with that. And I had a guest on my podcast who, she's called Sophie Cliff and she's a joy coach. I don't know if you've come across her, but she said this phrase that I will never forget. And she was basically like, should is the killer of joy. And so just like this idea, we get so in our head seeing what everybody else is doing and thinking, oh, well, I should be doing it like this, or I should be doing that. And I think trying to break away from that and maybe try what everyone says you should be doing. But if it doesn't feel right for you, then that's fine. And you can find a different way. Like I'm a big believer that there's not just one way to do things, not one way to run your business. And it's going to look different for everybody.
That's wonderful. What a brilliant quote from her as well. I won't be forgetting that one either. Thank you for passing it on, and thank you to her. I think what you spoke about there with the joy really will speak to people, actually. And I don't think, when we were growing up, we were necessarily taught to follow the joy. And that's okay. We're learning things differently now, and we can then experiment as we go on. But also what you spoke to a little bit earlier on about, you're quite an intuitive person. I think that allowing ourselves to tune in to perhaps what our heart feels without worrying too much about what the external societal messaging might be or what our serious head might say, it's just worth going with the flow, isn't it? And seeing what comes. And I'm a big believer as well that if we're enjoying what we're doing, that is going to ripple out not just throughout our business, but also to our friends, our family, our children. Actually, because
Mhm.
they know, they're pretty intuitive as well. Children, to know when mum's stressed out or completely chilled and in her absolute zone of genius and loving her work. So I think that there are so many positives to what you're talking about here, following the joy. So, before we move on to some of the topics that we're going to focus on today, I would really like to just bring something to the conversation that struck me and put a really big smile on my face when I was reading your bio. You talk about your specialism in branding and websites, and this is kind of in quotes, if you like, that help business owners feel genuinely proud to show off what they do, with clients walking away with more confidence and ready to shout about their work. That for me, it just spoke. It really spoke to me. It was a real mic drop moment, actually, because what you're saying is that you don't just design awesome branding and websites. There is actually so much more behind this, and so much more that you are gifting that business owner. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sort of phrase or that kind of thing I put in my bio was really born out of personal experience. And I remember, like, it's the classic thing where, as a designer working for other people, one of the things that gets neglected is my own branding and my own website and all of that sort of thing. And I had this website that had been neglected for years, and I just felt so embarrassed about it, to the point that I would never send anyone there. I was like, oh no, don't look at it. Like, I knew that I had to have it there, but I just didn't send anyone there. And like, I knew that that was having like a negative impact on my business because, I want to be in scenarios where I'm like, hey, yeah, go check out my website, find out more information. Like, it's a really important tool for your business. And so that experience, I guess, of feeling that embarrassment was like, this is not how I want my clients to feel. And then when I did invest the time and I did it, oh my goodness, the difference. I was like, this feels like it reflects me, it represents me. Like, I would describe my business as a personal brand. So it's very much about me and my personality. So it needed to sort of, yeah, like, have that come through. It needed to really feel like mine. And so I think going through that myself, I could really identify with clients who would come to me and they would be like, well, I kind of, put together my own branding, but it just doesn't really feel like me. And I just don't want to really show it to people. And then, there'd be lots of instances where they'd be like, well, I just haven't posted on social media because I don't have this in place yet. And I haven't updated my website because I know it doesn't look how I wanted it to. And I just realized, it's very similar, I would say, to the clothing that you wear. Like, when you wear an outfit that just feels so good, so you, like, the way you show up physically, the confidence that you exude is really different. So I think we've all, probably experienced that. And I think it's the same with your branding. When it feels aligned, when it looks just right, when you feel really confident about it, it then really impacts how you show up as a business owner, how you promote yourself. And I think that's, I mean, not the only way, but that's one of the ways where you can really see the impact that sort of the visual branding has on how you market yourself. Like, that's where I'm like, okay, you can see how this is going to make you more money because you are going to be so much more effective selling what you have to offer because you're really proud of it and you feel really good about it. So yeah, that's kind of where that was born. And I think, this is the case for so many small business owners I talk to. So often their business has come into existence out of a personal experience. Like, I was struggling with this thing, I found this solution, and now I want to offer that to other people. And while like graphic design was always, my career, like right from the start, I feel like that experience really helped me, I guess, to find the area that I wanted to work in and the sort of people that I wanted to work with.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I think it's really interesting that you had all the training, you've got all the qualifications, but you've almost niched because you started your own business. You are your ideal client, or you
Yeah.
were your ideal client. And what you spoke to there about, my website wasn't really up to scratch. We all have this, don't we? I sometimes joke that I need someone else to do my job on me, to
Yeah.
mentor me, because I can see it in everyone else's, but I can definitely shy away from all these business growth ideas and what have you in my own business. And also, I have so many people coming up to me when perhaps I'm hosting a networking event and I'm meeting them for the first time, and I'll ask them where I can connect with them online. And I'm sure you probably get this more than I do because of your line of business, but so often they'll say, well, I am on Instagram, but I really don't post there, or I'd rather you didn't look because it's not very good. And, I feel the same about my Instagram. I'm no designer. And, I look at everyone that does it really professionally, and then I compare myself unfavorably, because that's what so many of us do, just being very honest there. But what you're saying is that you completely understand, and that you can work with someone to really help them almost relinquish that self-doubt, and to really believe and then see that they can grow into their brand, that you can help them either, I guess, create or maybe uplift. I don't know whether that's something you do as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
sometimes it's a rebrand rather,
yeah.
like it's pushing it along rather than starting from scratch. But yeah, totally, I can identify with that.
It must be wonderful to see the difference in the clients' demeanor, even, or like you say, belief in their business, from what they're like when they arrive with you to how they are when you've perhaps finished a project with them. Does that feel good?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that is like my absolute favorite part of the whole process. And I had a client recently that had like a very sort of visible change in that area. And she would send me these messages and she'd be like, oh my goodness, like the ideas that I'm having just because I've got this new branding, or like it really sort of gave her a huge creative boost and just completely transformed like how she felt about what she was doing and what she was offering. And like, I'm very grateful that, sometimes you deliver the branding and then you don't necessarily stay in touch with the client so much, and you don't get to sort of witness that firsthand. But she, we became really good friends. She shared with me along the way, and it was really, really encouraging to see that. But even like another of my favorite things is just when I've sent them all the files, they've got everything they need, they've got their brand guidelines, and then I see them posting on Instagram and they're doing these like beautiful posts. And I'm like there behind my phone being like, yes, this looks so good. Like I love what they're doing and how they're showing up. And, like I think a big part of what I do as well is just being like a huge cheerleader for my clients, and like seeing that change and sort of celebrating with them as they start to show up in a different way online, whether that's on their website or on Instagram or wherever it is. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely for me one of the best bits, seeing that transformation.
That was the word that came into my mind when you were speaking. Cheerleader is exactly what you are, in addition to everything else. And I had these words come into my mind, that you get to see your work out in the wild, and
Mhm.
absolutely, shining brightly and making you proud, as well as making your clients so proud as well. What a wonderful, wonderful way to work with your clients. Now, I'm going to move us in a slightly different direction now. I think that the first time I came across you on social media, on Instagram, was when the gorgeous Hannah Eisted mentioned you and your rejection challenge. And it really, really fascinated me and drew me in as well. And I absolutely know that my listeners are going to be just as fascinated as I was. So I wonder whether you might please tell us a little bit about, firstly, where it came from, and what your intention is with it, and of course, how it's going.
Yeah, sure. Well, how it came about was I was at a conference a few years ago and I met this guy called Christo. You might not have come across him, but he's I think he's got like 1 million Instagram followers. He's like, very big in the sort of design content creation space. And I, did the classic thing. I bought his book, I shared an Instagram story, and he replied and was like, "Oh, thanks for sharing it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to shoot my shot. And I asked him to be on the podcast. And he got back to me and he was like, "How many downloads do you have?" And I told him, and he was like, "Oh, I'm looking for a bigger audience." And, like, total respect to the guy, he needs to have boundaries because he must get asked to be on podcasts all the time. But it felt bad. Like, I felt all sorts of different ways about it. I mean, it wasn't like it was a public rejection. Nobody else knew about it. But I felt really embarrassed for having asked him. I felt shame, like, oh, who was I to ask him to be on my podcast? All of these kind of things. Anyway, didn't think anything else of it, got over it, carried on with my, trip and the conference and everything. And then a few months later, I was thinking about approaching someone else to be on my podcast. And I caught myself thinking like, oh no, they're too big. Like, I'm not going to ask them because they're just going to say no. And suddenly I had this kind of like revelation where I was like, oh my goodness, my fear of being rejected, because that time it didn't feel good, is holding me back from doing what I want to do in my business. And I was like, and why is it a big deal if they say no anyway? And so a friend of mine, I can't take credit for the rejection challenge because a friend of mine had done something similar a few years before, and I think she'd seen it from someone else. There's actually a guy who did an amazing TED talk about rejection. I can't remember his name, but I'll find the link for you so you can share it. But so she put it much nicer. She did a no thank you challenge. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to do a rejection challenge. I'm going to try and get 100 rejections, and I'm actually going to start pursuing it, like trying to get the rejections. And what was fascinating to me is the mindset shift was just immediate, because again, sort of, it comes back to that pursuing the joy. Like, I'd taken something that was feeling like heavy and bad, and I basically created a win-win situation for me. I'd made it really fun. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna share about this, because one of the things that I realized was I was looking around at what everybody else was doing, and the story I was telling myself was, I'm the only one getting these rejections, and everybody else is just sailing through their business, and like, they're getting all these yeses. And so I was like, I'm going to share about it so that other people know, like, I'm getting rejected, because I think that is part of it, is just like acknowledging that this is a totally normal thing. It's happening to literally everybody. And I have interviewed some really high profile people on my podcast now, and every single one of them has talked about, in their journey, their creative story, whatever, how they run their business, they've all mentioned rejections or things that didn't go to plan or all this sort of stuff. And so I'm like, it's literally happening to everybody. But we just tell ourselves all of these different stories. So yeah, started documenting it. I would like write down, what I pitched for, like if I got a rejection, if I got a yes. And so the goal was to get 100 in 6 months. And I haven't even got to 50 yet, and that was 3 years ago. So, I mean, part of it is I had to slow down because I had this year where I was pitching for loads of stuff, and I realized that, well, I was basically getting so many yeses, like I couldn't keep up with like delivering all of the things I'd pitched for. So I had to scale it back. So I'm still like slowly chugging away. I'm still pitching for things, still sort of getting rejections. But interestingly, pretty much the whole way through, I've had a pretty 50% yes versus rejection rate, which I think is really good. So I've ended up having lots of experiences and things happen that probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started the challenge, because I just wouldn't have pitched for the thing. I mean, it's completely transformed my business. It's completely changed my mindset. I do still catch myself going back into negative ways of thinking. And so I have to be like, okay, like, I'm quicker at recognizing like the thought process and be like, oh, okay, I can see myself going back to that place. So I need to kind of like recalibrate. The other thing I realized is that it's not about getting rid of the negative feeling. So I realized that I wasn't necessarily going to remove that sinking feeling you get when you get rejection. And that was never really the goal. It was more how I then decided to respond to it. So I haven't cured myself of like not enjoying rejection, but what I have done is I have changed how I then respond. So I recover so much faster. I might give myself a little bit of time to feel sad about it or, to process it, but I don't dwell on it and I move on to the next thing. Or I go away and I potentially do some work and then repitch for the thing. I think that was another big lesson for me is like, I realized that I wasn't pitching for things because I was afraid that if I got a no, that was the end. And I never, it was almost like better to not pitch and there being this possibility in the future that I would get the thing. And so what I realized was it doesn't have to be the end. I can go back and I can pitch for that thing again. I can ask for that opportunity again. Not in every scenario, but in most scenarios, like you can go back and you can say, oh look, here's like how I changed or developed or I've grown or whatever, and you can go back and ask again. So yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely huge in terms of how it changed my business. And what's been so nice is the process of sharing it has just resulted in all these incredible conversations. Like the number of people who've messaged me being like, okay, I decided to just give it a go. And now I'm speaking at this event that I'd always just dreamed about, or I'm working with this client. And like, it's just so cool to hear, like the amazing impact it's had on other people as well. And again, like, it's not my concept. I didn't come up with it, but I think just encouraging people to be a bit more open about failure and rejection is something that I feel really strongly about because we're all dealing. It's just part of navigating running your own business. Like, not even running your own business. It's just part of life, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, yes, it wasn't your concept, but what you did do was you picked it up and you ran with it. And I think because of your wonderful expertise in branding as well, you made it look good. And you also sell your rejection sticker chart as well, which for me, that just takes me back to just a really fun time, like being a kid. And I love a sticker. I love stationery. And actually these days, a bit like you, I love sort of pushing myself out of my comfort zone as well. And so it's really lovely for me to hear you talk about how it didn't necessarily change, you sometimes getting that feeling of, oh, it was a no, but it was about then how you responded to it. And what I'm also hearing there is that you're very conscious. You're really consciously observing your aims, your goals, your results or not, and then how you kind of course correct from them. And when you were speaking about just going for it, because actually not going for it, you kind of have this glimmer that there is a potential or possibility out there. That's exactly what I've been doing, holding back on sending my book proposal out to people. And funnily enough, in the last couple of weeks, I've literally almost grabbed a hold of myself by the collar and shaken myself and gone, Joe, please just put it out there, because if it gets rejected, then at least it shows you've got momentum because you've actually put it out there. So I'm very, very invested in your rejection challenge, and I am going to be buying a sticker chart as well and really ensuring that I keep pushing so much more in 2026. So thank you from me and also from the people that are listening to this and hearing this idea for the first time as well. So we share something in common, and it certainly isn't branding expertise because that is far from my forte. But you also host a podcast, and you're the host of the Building Your Brand podcast, which is really, really awesome. And we will absolutely pop a link in the show notes for everyone at the end. Could you tell us what made you choose to create it? And I also want to ask if you hesitated at all in having the idea and then bringing it to life. And I only say that because I sat on my idea for a long time. So yeah, why did you choose to start your podcast?
So I definitely did hesitate. I think in the back of my mind, I thought it was something that I would enjoy, but it was around sort of lockdown time and it felt like everybody was starting a podcast. And I am like the classic sort of petty person where I'm just like, well, if everybody's doing it, I don't want to do it. I'm the same with TV programs. I was actually chatting to someone about this the other day, where if everyone's talking about a TV program, I'm like, well, I don't want to watch it. And I always watch it 2 years later. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, this is amazing. Like, why did I like miss out on this when everybody else is watching it? So yeah, I definitely have form for that. But yes, I was very sort of like reluctant, and I was like, oh, everyone's doing it, I don't want to do it. But I kind of had this like sneaky suspicion based on what I knew of myself that I would probably love it. And I was friends online with this woman called Lucy Lucraft, who is a podcast producer, and we got chatting. And so basically she was like, look, I need new branding. You've got this idea for a podcast. How about we do a skill swap, and I will edit the first season for you so that you can just try it and see if you like it. And I was like, yeah, perfect. And, if I decided I didn't like it, I'd have 12 episodes, they'd be evergreen, I could just have it sitting there and it would be fine. And that was 5 years ago, and I haven't stopped since. So, so yeah, I basically fell in love with it, realized that it was like a format that worked really, really well for me, and I really enjoyed it. Again, sort of went into it without much strategy, very organic. It was sort of very organic. It grew very slowly, like it was a very slow burn. I think for me, the love of it is what kept me going, so I ended up carrying on working with Lucy, paying her to edit the podcast. So I actually invested a lot of money into the podcast that for at least a year wasn't necessarily like bringing me any sort of obvious financial return. That has like changed since, but I feel like I needed that love for it to keep it going, because it was a real sort of slow burn in terms of like growth and in terms of the impact on my business. I remember one of the things that she asked me to do at the beginning was like write down 20 ideas for episodes, because she was like, one of the things that you want to check is that like you have enough ideas to like keep this going. And I just like, it was just so easy. I had ideas for days. And I think I mean, I don't know, I think it's hard with a podcast that you need to make it sort of specific enough that the right people know it's for them, but also general enough that you can keep it up and you can keep making content through it. And I feel sort of fortunate that I think I've landed on like about the right balance. So many incredible things have happened off the back of it. I can list them all if you want, but yeah, so that's kind of how the podcast started, and it's now, I think I would say, become like a fairly sort of core part of my business, something that I've become sort of more known for in recent times, and definitely something that I plan to carry on for a while at least.
That's brilliant. So it's had an amazing impact, I would say, on your business, but also, would you say on you personally as well? Because it sounds like, you went into it, you weren't committing to more than that first season, thanks to the skill swap. And it's almost like you put your trust in, I'm going to give it a go. Let's see if I can make this a thing. And then you went on to really enjoy it, and clearly had so much content that you were willing and ready to share. I think something that stands out to me there is when you said about having to write that list, could you write 20 things that you could speak about? Did it surprise you how much base knowledge you have, or was it not a surprise maybe?
Well, at the start, I was doing interviews with other people, like exclusively. So it actually didn't really feel like it was so much about my knowledge. It was more about like what the topics were going to be, like could I think of the guests? In recent times, so sort of middle of last year. So every now and then I would do a solo episode, or maybe I'd do like a little summer series where I do solo episodes. Halfway, I think it was like maybe September, October last year, I did a summer series where it was solo episodes. And then I, quite surprisingly to me, decided to keep them going. And I've now, since October last year, I've been publishing 2 episodes a week. So one's an interview and one's a solo episode. And that has surprised me, like how I actually do have lots of things to say, lots of sort of knowledge to share. And it's been really nice to have, like, I love the interview episodes, and I definitely, don't ever want to sort of take that away. But it's really nice to sort of, I guess, like start developing my voice as an industry I hate the word, but like expert, sharing my expertise with people, or my, my opinions, my behind the scenes of running my business. And so I think that sort of added another layer to it. And yeah, I mean, there's always like that kind of like, am I going to have enough to say? Like, thankfully the solo episodes are only sort of like 10, 15 minutes long. So it's not as full on. But yeah, so I've kind of got both aspects there. But one of the things that I do really try and do, even when I'm interviewing other people, is bring my perspective in as well, because I want it to be a conversation. Like, I don't want it to just be like, here's the questions, like, and I'm barely there. Like, I want it to be like, oh, let's have a chat about this topic. And, sometimes, I mean, I try and do it nicely, but sometimes like I'll disagree with them and I'll give a different perspective. And, sometimes they'll talk about something and I will have had a really, similar experience and I can share that. So I think there's sort of ways that even with an interview episode, you can sort of bring in your expertise and your experience.
What a brilliant fusion you have. And I really, really love that the solo episodes have worked out for you as well. I don't know how you do it
I don't know why.
in terms of, 2 a week. Tim, who edits this, will hear this and go, don't get any ideas, Joe. But it's wonderful. And I love that you said that word. You are an industry expert. And when you paused there, I was ready to jump in and say it if you didn't. But it is about owning it. And, the people that listen to your podcast and tune in because they want to gain from your expertise and your wisdom and the way that you deliver it as well. It's unique and it's you. So, I very much applaud you on all that you've achieved with the podcast. Well done. Liz, I look at you with real admiration, okay? I see you as someone who has it all together in a very calm and confident way. You know your mind, and I just feel like what you have shared with me today, and also because of course I've thought about what I was going to speak about before we jumped on today, but so also from what I've seen of you online, I see someone who has it completely sussed, all sussed. Has your business journey been plain sailing, would you say, or have there been some bumps along the way?
I mean, yeah, so many bumps and like confidence knocks, things I've tried that haven't worked, like this sort of, I would say, especially sort of like when I was starting out in this kind of like last 6-year period of like going all in on running my own business, like right at the start, it felt like quite a slog maybe to kind of get it to where I wanted it to be, or even not even knowing where I wanted it to be yet. So that was quite hard. Like I had, situations where my communication with clients was terrible and a project went south and I had to sort of learn from that. That was quite painful, like knocked my confidence for a while. I had sort of product ideas that I launched and then basically didn't tell anybody about. So those totally flopped. And I realized the fact I didn't tell anyone about them was because I didn't really like them. So then it was like coming to terms with the fact that I'd put all this effort in and like, actually, I didn't want to do that thing that I just launched. So yeah, there's been so many bumps along the way. There's been so many knocks of confidence, so many pep talks. I think often, when you do push yourself outside of your comfort zone, like you have to contend with the fact that your confidence hasn't quite caught up yet with what the next thing that you're doing. And then you do the thing, and then obviously that, you've proved to yourself that you can do it, and then that gives you the confidence for the next time. But I've got, I feel one of the things that's massively helped me and I feel really fortunate about is I have got a really strong community around me of other small business owners who, I can voice note and be like, okay, here's what I'm worrying about today. And then they'll give me a little pep talk and they'll remind me, why I don't need to feel like that, or, but still understanding why I do. You mentioned like Hannah earlier, who is how you found me. Like Hannah and I are very good friends, and we talk every day about our businesses. And that is so helpful just to have someone else who understands what you're doing and what you're going through, but also is willing to be like, come on, Liz, like, don't let this story you're telling yourself stop you. Just get, like, Hannah's favorite thing to say to me is like, grow up, Liz. Oh, she's just saying it in a jokey way, but she's like, grow up, Liz, just do the thing. And I'm like, okay, fine. And so,
I love
it's
that.
having those people who are willing to sort of say the hard things to you. But yeah, it's not been smooth sailing. And I would say it's only in the kind of like last year or two where I feel like things have started to click into place in a way that I'm just like, okay, I can see the momentum, I can see the growth. Like, I feel like sort of found the things that I enjoy and that I want to invest in. And like, I know there's still so much more to go, but things have sort of started to click a bit more into place. Definitely not, still not plain sailing ever, but I think it does take a while to like find that. And I think so often we look at people online, as you were describing, and we think they've just always known, and, it all looks really sort of simple and cohesive. And usually it's at least 10 years of like scrabbling around, trying different things. And then suddenly something clicks into place and you're like, oh, okay, that's what I want to be doing. Yeah. And then it looks plain sailing from the outside, but it's really not.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I just think it's really important because I'm working with clients all the time, whether it's one-to-one or whether it's at my events or in the membership, and I'm very, very aware, and I've done this as well. So I'm basing this on myself as well as the community, that it's so easy for us to compare ourselves in a negative way compared with others that we see. So we build everyone else up and we compare their sort of beautiful front of house with our completely catastrophic at times backstage. So we quite often don't do ourselves any favors as business owners, and so I really appreciate you sharing so openly and so authentically, because I think it's of real benefit to your fellow business owners. Now, I would really love for you to share 3 things that my listeners could do today to start reframing rejection, and probably by doing that, starting to perhaps move forward in their business with a little bit more momentum. And I guess the number one thing could be maybe buy your rejection sticker chart. And I'm definitely going to be ordering one myself. So yeah, 3 things that my listeners could do to start towards that journey of reframing rejection.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we touched on some of these. I think my first one would be acknowledge that everybody is going through it. So it's not a signal that something's going wrong for you. It's a signal that something's going right for you. I think just coming to terms with like, this is part of the process. This is, even just from like my industry perspective, like, this is part of my creative process. It's just all part of what is going on. That is the first reframe that I think is really helpful to make. I guess my next one's a little bit more challenging, which would be that if you're not getting rejected, to really ask yourself why, because actually that is potentially a signal that you aren't sort of pushing yourself enough, or you aren't sort of moving in the right direction. Because if we've acknowledged that it's part of the process, if it's not happening, where are you sort of holding yourself back and limiting yourself to make sure that it doesn't happen? So I think there's an element of having to be really honest with yourself. And there's a few different reasons why it might be. Yes, it might be fear, but it also might be sort of ego, like not wanting to look like you're getting things wrong, like caring too much about what people think about you, all these different things. So I think being honest with yourself and unpicking why you're not getting rejection. And then I think, as I said before, reminding yourself that it's not the end of the story, and often it's the start of a better story. So trying to move past this idea that if I ask for the thing that I really want and I don't get it, that it, what can I learn from that, and where's that going to take me next? And it'll either be that that wasn't the right thing for you and it moves you in the direction of something that is the right thing, or it'll be that it is the right thing and you go away and you grow, you learn, you develop, and then you go back and pitch for that thing again. So those would sort of be the three key things that I think will help people change their mindset on it. And then, I mean, well, this is like a fourth thing now, but if I mean, it depends on your personality, but I would encourage you to like turn it into a challenge, like set yourself, you don't need a sticker chart. You just need a like Google sheet or an Excel spreadsheet, and you just document it. And because so often we go on how we feel, and how you might feel is like you're getting rejected all the time. But when you start documenting it, you might realize that like 70% of the time you're getting yeses, but those 30% of rejections feel really, really big. And so having sort of like cold, hard data to give you an accurate representation of what's actually going on is really helpful.
How brilliantly said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is the kind of data that I really like the idea of. I'm not really a numbers
No,
person
me neither.
or a data person, but I think you're so right. There's always that negative bias. And I think especially when we're business owners, it feels personal, and, we could get 50 great reviews and one that's more constructive. And that's the one that we're going to allow us to just topple like
Yeah.
dominoes. So I very much hear you, and I'm going to do this with the data side of things, but I am getting a sticker chart. I'm not settling for a Google form, which is very kind of you to suggest people can do it like that. But yeah, I'm going to be ordering in a minute. So thank you. I think that those were 3 really valuable tips that people can go and start taking action with today, which is exactly what I was hoping we'd be able to do with them. So, what for you is the toughest thing about working for yourself?
I think, honestly, it's wanting to do so many different things and just not having the capacity to do them. So I have lots of ideas. Quite enjoy lots of different things. I, want to do it all, and I want to get really good at it all. But obviously, I am limited in terms of time and resources. And so I think having to be like, okay, like this would be fun to work on, but these are my priorities. And, maybe that gets put on a sort of not right now list, maybe someday in the future. I think having to deal with that frustration is the thing that I find the hardest.
I don't think anyone's ever given that answer, but I relate to it really, really strongly, actually. That's your creative mind, isn't it? You've got so many exciting ideas and plans. I like that you do log the ones that you're not going to take action with immediately, because it's amazing. I find how quickly a great idea can just sort of disappear into the background when we're so busy. So that's wonderful that you log it. And thank you for that really, really interesting answer. I love that. What is the best thing about working for yourself?
I am like a classic extrovert, and so for me, it really is like the people. So, well, I would say there's like 2 prongs to this answer. It's the people, the relationships I get to build up. So whether that's with like clients or other business owners I work with or podcast guests, like I feel like the opportunities I've had to meet such amazing, inspiring people, that just really energizes me, gives me a big boost, really inspires me. But I think on the other side of it is the freedom to pursue the joy and to build a business that I love and that works for me. And I think that is why I would find it really hard to work for someone else again, because I just feel so much joy in being able to be like, oh, I've had this idea. I'm just going to try it out and see if it works. Like there's something for me creatively, like that is huge, and that keeps me very inspired and enjoying what I'm doing day to day. So yeah, that freedom is the other sort of aspect of it.
That's lovely. And the way that your smile just took up the whole screen as you were sharing that, just I could feel the good vibes and the energy and all that heart behind what you do. That's wonderful to hear. So, as you know, the name of my business is How Does She Do It? Because I don't believe that she does do it all, at least not at the same time. Can you tell me one thing that you either do or perhaps don't do anymore to ensure that you remain on track, healthy, and happy in your life and business?
A huge one for me has been outsourcing things and asking for help. I remember once I hired a coach to work with. It was a public speaking coach. And I remember my friend saying to me, "Well done for asking for the help that you need." And it was such a simple statement that she said, but it reminded me that I'm not always the best at asking for help. But it is that help that allows me to do it. And I think, people I would say I'm a one-woman business in the sense that I don't have any employees, but I do outsource things. And so, when people are like, "How do you do it?" I'm like, "Well, someone else edits my interview podcast episodes. Someone else creates my brand guidelines for me because I hate doing that bit of my job." So I think definitely like outsourcing, getting support where I need it, paying for a coach, like those sort of things. I couldn't necessarily do that right at the start of my business, but I've got to a point now where I can like invest in those areas. So that's huge. I mean, and like the first thing that I ever outsourced, and I don't think people often think, I mean, you can't business expensive, but it was intentional in terms of my business, was me and my husband are both self-employed. And so we outsourced the cleaning because we were like, well, we'd rather have that time to work on our businesses than to have to do that. So I think like just thinking about, okay, where are the areas, whether it's in your business or just in your life, where you can ask for help to sort of ease the pressure is huge. So yeah, I don't do it all on my own for sure. I don't know if that asked your question. What was one thing that I stopped doing?
Or do no, or one thing that you do or don't do. And I think
Okay. Yeah.
you've absolutely
Answered
covered
that.
that.
I think on the other side, one thing that I will say, and I think this is more of a work in progress for me, but I definitely have people pleaser tendencies. And so one thing I'm trying to stop doing is saying yes to things just because I don't want to upset other people. So I'm trying to get to stop saying yes to everything. So get better at saying no. And like, part of it is I've just had to because like you say, I can't do it all. But also, I think part of it comes back to that sort of strategy aspect. And actually, like this comes full circle to the sort of story of, that guy rejecting me being on my podcast. Like you do have to have boundaries and you have to put in place sort of, yeah, these boundaries so that like you don't end up just saying yes to every opportunity that comes your way. And he modeled that very well.
He really did. And that, if you took nothing else from that rejection, if we want to call it
Mm,
rejection, you took a great business learning
yeah.
actually from it. We do have to really respect our boundaries and fair play to him. But again, as I think you said at the time, things change as well. So you could go back to him this year
Yeah,
and get a big fat yes. So
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
nothing's the end, as you said. One thing that just came to me when you were speaking just then about the kind of people pleasing element, which I very much relate to, and I'm trying to work on as well. Could you create a little sticker chart for that as well? For the
Well,
saying,
I said no to someone. Yeah, yes. That's a
because
really good idea. I'm gonna write that down.
because I can tell you that possibly 75% of the people in the How Does She Do It membership would buy that one.
Yeah, yeah.
As I think they will the rejection one as well once they hear this conversation on the podcast. So yeah, there you go. Just a thought that came to my mind.
I love it. I'm gonna like have to start a whole new business of just sticker charts just to make all the things that we don't like in our business a bit more fun.
Seriously. Yeah, put it on that list that doesn't get thrown away, just in
Yeah.
case it's something that you can come back to. Yeah,
Mm.
I would definitely be a customer. So before we leave today, I would absolutely love for you to let my guests know where they can find you online and also how they can find the podcast as well.
Yeah, of course. So if you want to find out more about me and my sort of branding services, you can check out my website, which is lizmosley.net. Follow me on Instagram where I'm at Liz M. Mosley. And then the podcast is buildingyourbrand.net. And it all sort of very much falls under the same banner. So maybe you're not looking for branding, but you just want help, in how you think about your branding and marketing, then the podcast is where to go and that'll help you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We will pop all of those links in the show notes, and also the TED talk
Yes,
that you
I'll find
mentioned.
that for you. Yeah.
If you find those details, that would be brilliant. Well, I've absolutely loved today. I'm feeling uplifted. I'm feeling inspired. I'm really, really feeling that the conversation that I've had with you today absolutely matches this sunny weather that we're experiencing at the moment. And I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Oh, I've loved it. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been such an honor. Thank you for saying yes. And I look forward to staying connected.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, I'd love you to take a moment to share and subscribe too. Come and join me over at How Does She Do It Life on both Facebook and Instagram. And until we speak again, I wish you a wonderful week ahead.